The gentleman here. Yeah.
Well, one comment is I really enjoyed the presentation. I learned a lot from them. And I had an idea while I was listening. Many companies right now have corporate social responsibility policies. And actually there is quite a plethora of codes around from various organizations. And I think that there might be a way in sort of facing companies by catching them on their own game, as it were, looking at their codes and really hold them to their own codes. I'm making that as a suggestion, and I'm not necessarily saying that all companies are bad, because there's a few companies, well, there's quite a few companies that are really trying to do their best in sticking to those codes. Second comment that I would make is that within the federal government, it has been my observation that there's great uncertainty as to how to deal with the First Nations rights, and how to deal with the rights that have been given to them, and how to deal with the pronouncements of what's it called, the highest court. So there's lots of confusion, and from an Indigenous or a First Nations perspective, there may something be gained by a very concerted effort aimed at those civil servants that are scratching their heads and wonder what to do, and that also get conflicting political signals.
This is a question for Luis. You mentioned connections between armed conflicts and resource extraction in Colombia, and oil, contestation over land, and the drug trade come to mind. With a settlement with the AUC paramilitary under the previous administration, and now the planned negotiations with FARC, the security situation seems to be improving in Colombia. But it seems that might bring another set of issues forward for indigenous peoples with increased foreign direct investment in oil, mining, agribusiness. I'm wondering if you could comment on how you see the potential impact.
And we can take one more.
Also for Luis, I'm very interested in the Human Rights Impact Assessment report that the Canadian government should be doing next year. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts about how Indigenous people in Colombia could participate, could help Canadians, if not our Canadian parliamentarians, to understand better the human rights impacts of that free trade agreement.
Si hay alguien que defiende la política de seguridad del Estado colombiano en los últimos años, no le va a gustar.
I have something to say, perhaps at this juncture, that someone who perhaps sees in a positive light or would defend the steps taken by the Colombian government in recent years around national security might not like.
Existen regiones en Colombia donde no hay confrontación armada tan fuerte.
It's true that there are parts of Colombia, regions in Colombia, where the armed struggle is not felt, is not as present. It may be there, but at a lower grade, lower level.
Sin embargo, sí se registra violación a los derechos humanos, amenazas a los líderes, desplazamiento forzoso, violencia sexual contra mujeres.
Nonetheless, even in those regions, we see cases of violations of human rights, forced displacement of population, sexual violence against women, threats, assassinations.
Muchas de esas violaciones son cometidas por militares que más que cuidar a la población civil están cuidando a las empresas.
A lot of these violations are carried out by military personnel from the National Armed Forces who, of course, are mandated and supposed to be protecting the rights of the civilian population, but instead are in fact protecting the rights of various economic interests and companies.
En muchas regiones donde se desmovilizó el paramilitarismo, lo que observamos es el incremento de las violaciones a derechos humanos por actores que no se identifican.
What we've seen in many regions, and you alluded to this in your question, where there's been a demilitarization of some of the paramilitary groups, is in fact an increase of human rights violations by certain actors who are never really identified.
Entonces hace pensar que fuera delincuencia común, pero para nosotros hace parte de la estrategia de presión y de intimidación a nuestras organizaciones.
Which allows some to say that it's just common petty criminality. But we know certainly from our point of view that that's not the case, and in fact that kind of a discourse is precisely one that allows people to ignore what's really going on.
En tanto exigen derecho a la consulta, respeto a las organizaciones, en tanto exigen seguimiento a los impactos de esas empresas.
And that's precisely, a change to the situation is precisely what we're calling for, so that there is real, legitimate and genuine consultation, ethic, free and prior informed consent, and real respect for the rights of our communities.
En Colombia está demostrado que en muchas regiones del país, que toda vez que ha habido un interés económico o de alguna empresa sobre algún recurso natural, se incrementa el desplazamiento forzado, las amenazas, la presión sobre las comunidades.
In Colombia, it's pretty irrefutable and backed up by a lot of evidence that any area or region where there has been an increase in extractive activity or extraction of various natural resources, there's also been an increase in violations to human rights.
Ahora, en Colombia nos aprestamos a un posible proceso de paz con las FARC.
Now, in Colombia, we're starting down the road of a peace process with the FARC.
Y una de las grandes preocupaciones nuestras es, en ese proceso de negociación, qué se va a plantear respecto de la autonomía, la territorialidad y los recursos naturales que tienen los pueblos indígenas.
And one of our great concerns about this peace process is what is going to be said and decided in terms of autonomy, sovereignty, self-government, control over lands and resources by indigenous peoples.
Para nosotros, el problema de la violencia contra nuestros pueblos va más allá de la confrontación armada. No se supera solo con la desmovilización de los grupos armados.
Because for us it's very clear that the problem of violence against our peoples and violation of human rights of our indigenous peoples in Colombia goes beyond just a simple solution to the decades-old armed conflict, and that resolving that conflict alone will not resolve those violations.